Hello guys. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about flash brew. Alright, so one of the cool things about flash brewing is that you get iced coffee relatively quickly. Some of you might be asking why I'm making a video like this. It's about to be winter time, it's cold out. Well, we can have iced coffee any time of the year. You don't have to justify it. But there are a few things to know. Instead of me just talking to the camera this whole time, why don't we switch the point of view up? We'll brew it. I'll throw some numbers up on the screen. We'll talk about weights, we'll talk about ratios and times, and extraction, because that's a kind of important thing for iced coffee in particular. So let's go do that. Come on. All right, guys. So I am behind the camera right now. What I'm gonna do is introduce you to some of the equipment. You don't need anything more than you would normally need for, say, a V60 brew, a typical pour over, except the introduction of ice in addition to everything else you'd normally have. So let's get started. So what we're gonna do is work with a 30-gram brew. For this 30-gram brew, I'm gonna use this Brazilian Oberon coffee that I roasted on the 19th of this month. A nice medium. It's got a simple profile. It is a natural process, but it's extremely low altitude. So anyway, that's a little bit beside the point. And for me, I always start with whole bean. So we're gonna weigh our beans. And we're looking for 30 grams. So we've got our V60, we've got our carafe, kettle back here, and the grinder is right here. Another important part here is that 40% of the total water in this whole process is ice. So that's 40% of water that isn't actually extracting coffee. So we need to make a couple adjustments to make sure that we're properly extracting our coffee to have a pleasant drink. One of those things we can control is our grind size, and to get a little bit more extraction out of the same amount of coffee, you can grind a little bit finer, and that's what we're gonna do. So normally on my fellow ode, I'm somewhere between 4 and 5 for a V60, so I'm gonna turn it down to 3. Let's grind this coffee. Okay, so we have our ground coffee. We're gonna set that aside for the moment, because now we're gonna get our water ready. Now, remember when I said we're doing a 480 gram brew with water? 40% of that is going to be in the form of ice. So the other 60% is actually what we're gonna brew as hot water into the coffee. So let's do that, get our 60% of 480 into our kettle, because the other 40% is gonna be ice cubes going into the carafe. So let's do that real quick. So yes, this involves a little bit of math, but that's what our phones are for, right? Grab your calculator. 480 times 0.4, that's 192. That's how much ice we're gonna use. 480 minus 192, that's how much water we're going to make hot for our filtered brew. The other 40%, ice cubes in the carafe. So the filtered hot coffee is going to be falling onto the ice cubes in the carafe. Let's get started. We're gonna heat this up. I'm gonna set it to 200, a little hotter than I normally would for pour over, because we wanna make sure that all the ice actually melts in the brew process when it hits down into the carafe. All right, let me adjust here so you can see a little bit more of what's going on. All right, good deal? Cool. That water's just about ready, so we're gonna get a filter, and then we are going to pre-wet our filter just over the sink with some hot water, and that'll at least cut out some of the taste difference using a paper filter here. So let's do that. Okay, we are going to now get our ice and add our ice in, get our coffee in, and then we will brew. All right, take this off. Remember, we're looking for 192 grams for this 30-gram brew of coffee. 189. I think we're gonna stick with 189 there. We'll reset our scale. Now we're going to do a bloom 2 to 3 times the weight of the coffee in here for bloom. So we're gonna aim for anywhere between 60 and 90. Let's just call it 75, why don't we? We're gonna start our timer, begin to pour. Making sure everything is saturated evenly. Get that back on the kettle to stay warm. We're gonna let that bloom for 45 seconds, just like a normal V60 pour over. Let's get the rest of our ice back in the freezer. Okay, let's pretend I didn't take a minute and a half to do this, and at 45 seconds you would pour. Pour, pour, pour. Get this brew process started. Now, like I said, with a finer grind, you're gonna get a little more extraction because that total brew water is cut down by 40% of it being ice down there. It's not doing any extraction up here. Using a little bit of hotter water, using some finer grinds, you're gonna make up for a little bit of lost extraction there. We're gonna do a little swirl here just to help that extraction process along. As our brew finishes up, that ice will be melting. This should only take about 3 minutes in total. Okay, so the brewing is actually complete. Let's take this off. Get our last couple drops out of that. And we can set that aside. And what we have here is a lot of half melted ice and coffee. So we're just gonna swirl and make sure that all that ice ends up melted. It's okay if it takes a minute. And once everything is pretty well melted, you'll be able to serve this over ice. Now, if you're finding that your ice isn't melting very fast at all, that you've got some ice floating around in there, you could experiment with increasing your water temperature, maybe up to the boiling point. As I did 200, perhaps 210 or so would have helped this process along a little faster, but that's okay. Let's get our glass ready. Now, the amount of ice you add into your glass is not scientific at all. It's just what you would prefer to be drinking it with. So, fill her up. And at this point, we're ready to pour. It's okay if there's still a couple tiny little bits of ice in there. And voila, we have flash brewed iced coffee. Now, one of the benefits to this here, you get to taste origin qualities that you don't normally get to taste if you were to make cold brew iced coffee. Cold brew tends to make coffee's palates much narrower. We brewed this hot, so you're going to be able to get a range of flavors that just doesn't present in cold brew. Cold brew tends to lean into chocolatey, earthy, toned down, super mellow profiles. What we're going to be able to find here are some more acidic tones that tend to give us some fruitier notes. They can give us anything on the coffee wheel like you would normally get from a hot brewed coffee. I want you to try this, and I want you to experiment. Everyone's preferences are different, and you can kind of tune this to how you might like your iced coffee. I would love for you to leave in the comments below maybe how you make your iced coffee. How are you doing iced coffee? How are you flash brewing if you're flash brewing? And did you learn something today? Drop a like, I'd really appreciate it. Sub for me, I'd love for you to stick around. I've got more stuff coming. Pretty soon here, I'm gonna do kind of an overview on the gear I use, and then either I'm gonna include it or make a separate video on starter equipment to get you in the right position to begin doing stuff like this without spending an arm and a leg. So give me a thumbs up, drop a sub for me, I'd really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. See you guys.
Oh, that's good.